Hello, I'm Sayakat Cosplay, and welcome to the last video in the series of the Golden Eagle Armor Helmet build. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I finished this helmet. So in the past two videos, I've shown you how I patterned the helmet, put it together, and now it's time to paint and finish this helmet. If you like today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button and bell notification for the next time I put up a new video. Alright, let's get into finishing this helmet. In a nutshell, this finishing process involves sanding, gap filling, priming, and painting. Those are the four major steps to finishing any sort of armor build. This helmet doesn't really have a lot of sanding needs, but I'm going to sand down some of the seams just to make them nicer and cleaner. To do this sanding, I am using a rotary sanding tool. In particular, I have a Dremel. I'm using a 120 grit sanding barrel, and I have a flex shaft attachment for my Dremel. For this particular project, the dremeling didn't take all that long. It only took me 5 or 10 minutes. There really wasn't a lot to touch up. And once the dremeling is finished, I'm going to go ahead and seal any gaps in any of the seams. I'm going to seal these gaps with Quick Seal. This is a silicone-based caulking. It's usually used for kitchen repair, but it is great for cosplay. It's great for filling gaps. This caulking does shrink when it dries, so make sure if you need more than one layer to put it on, let it dry, and add another layer if you think you need it. This caulking is also water soluble and non-toxic, so you can use your hands to smooth it out and use water to thin it out at the edges. Please note that sanding this stuff isn't easy and I wouldn't recommend it, so make sure that the layer is nice and flush with your edges of anything that you're gap filling before it goes and dries. You can sort of wet sand it, but when I've tried that, I've had sort of mixed results. The next step in finishing this helmet is priming it. You can do this in a multiple number of ways. For this particular project, since I was already using Plastidip for something else that I was doing at the same exact time, I decided to Plastidip this helmet. I didn't record this because I do this out in my garage, which is not got the best lighting, and I'm just spraying the helmet with Plastidip. It's not really all that exciting. If you wanted to prime this a different way, you can use Hex Flex, Flex Seal, Mod Podge. Those are all PVA glue primers. They're non-toxic. You can use any sort of glue that you want, as long as it's a flexible white glue. You could even use Elmer's if you wanted. The one thing about Plastidip is it's toxic. The fumes are toxic, so if you're going to be using it, use it in a well-ventilated area with a fume respirator, and make sure that you don't breathe in the Plastidip fumes. A couple other of sort of tips for using Plastidip is make sure that the can is warm. If the can is not warm, you can end up with bubbles and flecks, and the Plastidip can kind of, not be really smooth. So to warm up the can, you just need to get some hot tap water, immerse the can in that hot tap water for about 5 minutes, and then make sure the can is well shaken before you apply your Plastidip. It's also best to apply Plastidip in thin, even layers, and make sure to hold the can about 8 to 10 or 12 inches away from the prop that you are Plastidipping. And it's going to take 2 or 3 coats at least. If you're doing really thin layers, it may take 4 layers of Plastidip to get it coated enough that it is ready for paint. The paint that I used was the Rust-Oleum Metallic in Vintage Gold. Again, I don't have footage of this because I was spray painting in my garage. But you're gonna do like Plastidip, you're gonna do multiple thin layers of this paint, and probably takes 2 or 3 layers. It kind of was a little fuzzy, I don't really remember, because this was done in multiple sections. Since this helmet I had to spray right side up, upside down, in various ways to get the gold coverage over all of the surface. So once all of that spraying is done, you have a nice gold base layer. And the final step in the process is to detail paint. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but once you've covered your prop, or in this case armor, in a base layer of paint, it sort of looks flat. It doesn't really have a lot of depth. And that means that with armor, I usually detail paint, and that means low lighting and highlighting. So I'm going to low light with black around the seam lines and highlight with white on the high points and edges of the piece. It may look a little cartoonish when you do it, and it may not be your style. You may not want to highlight like I do, but in photos it looks amazing. So make sure, if you aren't highlighting, to at least low light or black wash, or make this thing look a little bit more realistic with a little bit of shading. You can even shade with a different color of gold if you want. I chose to go for a little bit more of a poppy look with just a black low light and a white highlight. So it's kind of up to you as to how you want to finish the paint job, but make sure that you do some sort of detail painting or weathering or aging. It just is going to give the piece a much more finished and put together look than just a flat base paint. If you want, you can also just use acrylic paints instead of using spray paint and acrylic. You can use airbrush paints to paint this. It's up to you. There's many different options. I was using plastic dip and spray paint because, like I said earlier, I was doing other work with those paints and primers. This finishing process actually doesn't take as long as the building process, which is nice that I don't have to spend quite as much time painting and finishing this as I did building it, because that build process was a long one. With all of the priming and painting and everything, it's still going to take a day or two to kind of get this finished. The primer, the plastic dip, I would suggest allowing that to dry and kind of cure for at least overnight before you start spray painting. And the spray paint, if you're using spray paint with metallic spray paints, it can take actually a couple of days for the paint to fully cure. So I would give it at least a couple hours after your final coat to start detail painting. It can be pretty sticky, so be aware that if you start detail painting and finishing the paint job before the spray paint is finished curing, you can potentially leave like finger marks or thumbprints or fingernail marks in the paint. So if you want to be really careful about not messing up your paint job, spray with plastic dip on one day, spray with spray paint on another day, and then finish your paint job on a third day. You can go ahead and do other things in between. It's just going to take a couple days to finish off painting this thing, but in the end you're going to end up with a really nice and shiny helmet. And that's it. That's how you finish this thing off. And with that, part 3 is done. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this 3-part making of series videos. If you like these videos, again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.